Under Ben Bulben is a great poem, which we are going to get to talk about. And Ben Bulben is what you are looking at. It is this flat top mountain on the west coast of Ireland. Right here. The poem, Under Ben Bulben, is this fantastic poem about Ireland, about being an artist, and about history. It is written by William Yeats, who was probably Ireland's best poet. And he wrote about love, he wrote about life, he wrote about art, making art, and he wrote about politics, particularly Ireland getting free of England. This is his gravestone. And guess what? It is right next to Ben Bulben. And the phrase on the gravestone and the grave itself is mentioned in the poem. We'll come back to that. The poem itself has 6 parts. We'll go through each of them really quickly. But before we do, there are a handful of names and references which you totally do not need to know to enjoy the poem. So don't get tripped up. Don't worry about it. Part 1. Yeats sort of creates this really cool mythic mood with this incantation at the beginning, which mostly honors the Irish people of the past, but mostly sets the mood for the whole poem. So soak it up. Part 2, he notes that we live our lives between our identity to ourself and our identity with relation to our race or our ethnicity, and bouncing back and forth between the two. He also says that the worst thing in life is not death, but simply being away from the people that you love. And death in the end may be diligent, but it really isn't the end. Part 3. Surprising, he says that in order to really know who you are, this may come only through some kind of shock or moment of violence, some kind of rite of passage. Part 4. He's speaking directly to the artists, particularly poets and sculptors. He says, you have a huge job. Your job is to bring the soul of man to God. And also points out that today's artists, which would have been the early to mid 20th century, are basically all confused and making junk. Part 5. Speaking specifically to Irish poets, he threatens them, don't you dare make junk. And instead proposes some topics they might cover, including ordinary people, and writing about the ordinary people of Ireland and making them mythic. Part 6. Now we're in the churchyard, under Ben Bulben, where Yeats is buried, and basically says, I've cut these words into my tombstone, and so this poem is part of that. It is part of his legacy and eulogy. So he wrote this poem knowing that he was going to cut these words into the gravestone. He wrote this in the year before he died. So the poem in itself is about life and how to live it, and death and not to fear it. It's pretty fantastic. Okay, now I'm going to read it. Under Ben Bulben. Swear by what the sages spoke round the Meriotic lake, that the witch of Atlas knew, spoke and set the cocks a-crow. Swear by those horsemen, by those women, complexion and form prove superhuman, that pale, long-visaged company that heirs in immortality. Completeness of their passions won, now they ride the wintry dawn, where Ben Bulben sets the scene. Here's the gist of what they mean. Many times man lives and dies between his two eternities, that of race and that of soul, and ancient Ireland knew it all. Whether man dies in his bed, or the rifle knocks him dead, a brief parting from those dear is the worst man has to fear. Though grave diggers' toil is long, sharp their spades, their muscles strong, they but thrust their buried men back in the human mind again. You that Mitchell's prayer have heard, send war in our time, O Lord. Know that when all words are said, and a man is fighting mad, something drops from eyes long blind. He completes his partial mind, for an instant stands at ease, laughs aloud, his heart at peace. Even the wisest man grows tense with some sort of violence before he can accomplish fate, know his work, or choose his mate. Poet and sculptor do the work, nor let the modish painter shirk what his great forefathers did. Bring the soul of man to God. Make him fill the cradles right. Measurement began our might, forms a stark Egyptian thought, forms that gentler Phidias wrought. Michelangelo left a proof on the Sistine Chapel roof, where but half-awakened Adam can disturb globe-trotting madam till her bowels are in heat. Proof that there's a purpose set before the secret working mind, profane perfection of mankind. Quattrocento put in paint on backgrounds for a god or saint, gardens where soul's at ease, where everything that meets the eye, flowers and grass and cloudless sky, resemble forms that are or seem when sleepers wake and yet still dream, and when it's vanished, still declare with only bed and bedstead there that heavens had opened, gyres run on. And when that greater dream had gone, Calvert and Wilson, Blake and Claude prepared a rest for the people of God. Palmer's phrase, but after that, confusion fell upon our thought. Irish poets, learn your trade. Sing whatever is well made. Scorn the sort now growing up, all out of shape from toe to top. Their unremembering hearts and heads, base-born products of base beds. Sing the peasantry, and then hard-riding country gentlemen, the holiness of monks, and after porter drinkers' randy laughter. Sing the lords and ladies gay that were beaten into clay through 7 heroic centuries. Cast your mind on other days, that we in coming days may be still the indomitable Irishry. Under Ben Bulben's head, in Drumcliff churchyard, Yeats is laid. An ancestor was rector there, long years ago. A church stands near, by the road an ancient cross. No marble, no conventional phrase. On limestone quarried near the spot, by his command these words are cut. Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horsemen, pass by. If you're curious about the references, I will go through them quickly. Most of them are artists who Yeats admired, and it's basically his take on the history of good art. So first, in the incantation part, he talks about a Mareotic lake, which is a lake in Egypt near Alexandria, and at one point a bunch of early Christian monks lived there. So that's probably the sages he's referring to. The Witch of Atlas is the title of a poem by a poet, Shelley. And guess what? The Mareotic Lake gets mentioned in there too. Okay, on to part 2. Mitchell's prayer. John Mitchell was an Irish nationalist who basically urged God to send war in our time. So that is what Yeats is referring to. In the fourth section, this is where we start to talk about artists, and that he starts very early and points to the early Egyptian artists, forms of stark Egyptian thought, and then onto Greek artists, the Greek sculptor Phidias, and then onto Michelangelo. So here we go, Michelangelo on the Sistine Chapel roof right there, where half awakened Adam, looking slightly sleepy there, can disturb globe-trotting madam. Quattrocento is the 1400s in Italy. It describes an art period where a lot of famous painting was done. This is one example, and where he notes the flowers and grass and cloudless sky of these painters. So, towards the end of this section, he rattles off a bunch of artists, painters, and some writers that he admired. Calvert and Wilson, Blake and Claude prepared a rest for the people of God, Palmer's rays, but after that confusion fell upon our thought. So those are all the names and references in the poem, and that is Under Ben Bulben.